my handyman went in to fix something else and texted me. He's like, Rick, your tenant's, the ex-husband is on TV. He's being arrested for embezzling. And it's like, these guys were professional swindlers.
Hey, Colorado Springs, this is Jenny Bayless, and I am excited to have our guest on today. We are going to be speaking with Rick Staael, and he's an engineer by day and owns multiple rental properties along the Front Range, including Colorado Springs and Pueblo, which is what we're going to focus on today. Rick, how are you doing?
Very good, Jenny. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. If you wouldn't mind, would you be able to tell everyone a little bit about your real estate background and, kind of where you're at today?
Sure. Yeah, so I grew up in North Dakota. I wanted to be an engineer, so I went down the technical path. I eventually got an associate's degree and then an engineering degree, and moved out to Colorado back 20 years ago. And I was very happy working for the man at an engineering firm, and got married, had a kid. We were living up in Longmont in a small townhome, and it was getting too small, so we needed to move in 2007. So right as the market was starting to crack, we went to sell our little townhome, and I was going to lose $10,000 after all the money I put into it, and I was going to, lose a lot of money. So I told my wife, I asked my wife, I can't do any worse than losing $10,000. So I've always wanted to try to get into real estate. I've always wanted to be a landlord. So, we kept the townhome, scraped up enough money to buy the second house, and rented out the townhome. And I was nervous, scared to this whole real estate landlord thing, but it turned out wonderful. The first tenants were just great people. I felt like I was adding value and helping the community. I started calculating numbers as an engineer and laid out my worst case, best case scenarios. And I was hoping for a best case, and I came back like a year or two later, and the numbers just blow everything away. Even with a down market, I was still making good cash flow, and they're paying off the principal, and so anyhow, that was my step into it, and it was very nice.
Do you still own that property today?
I do. Yep.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely something to kind of highlight, since we're kind of entering this phase of uncertainty, as you will. So I think that it's really good to just highlight that, if you buy a good performing property that, is constructed well in a good location, just a very good rental property, and just kind of hang on to it for a while. I think more than likely you'll end up ahead in that scenario.
Yeah, we actually just paid it off a couple of years ago. So
hey, congrats! That's awesome.
Yeah.
So did you pay it off, or did your tenants pay it off?
Very good point. Both, I think.
Very good. Yeah. That's great. That's great. So, how many properties do you have now, and kind of where are they located?
So we have 7 properties, and 2 of them are duplexes. So we have 9 doors. And then just recently, I've dipped my toes into fix and flips down in Pueblo.
Very cool. So I know that when we were talking before, you were mentioning that you have a couple of properties located in Colorado Springs. So buy and hold rentals. So let's start there. We'll kind of talk about that, and we'll move to your Pueblo fix and flip a little later. So how many properties do you have in Colorado Springs right now?
3.
3. Okay. And I know they're kind of located usually on the west side of town, right?
Right. Two of the 3 are on the west side, and then the last one I bought is in kind of a little bit on the east side.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm sure they're probably pretty high in demand with tenants.
Yeah.
Being on the west side and everything. But I know that you're mentioning to me one property that's kind of interesting in particular, specifically what you're doing to do a value add to it. So yeah, if you could kind of enlighten everyone, just a little bit of background on the property as it currently is, and then what you're looking to do, with your ADU.
Right. So this property was my first one down in Colorado Springs. It was new to me down in the Springs, and it was just a little more affordable. That's why I was heading down there, and then now heading to Pueblo.
Yeah.
But I went down there. It was a estate sale essentially. I got to know the owner. The owner was showing the house, so it was kind of an odd situation. And I actually, just struck up a conversation with her and got to know her. And it was her family home, so. In the world of business and stuff, it's still personal. These are people's homes, and
For sure.
she grew up there. And anyhow, so that helped, me try to find this deal. And I needed, to have it at the right price.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just read the book, what was it, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And, he gives a lot of tips on there about, just have your numbers and just keep expressing over and over, this is the number I needed at. And, there's, don't play games and just lay it out there. And that's what I did. And they came down like, I don't know, $16,000, I think, on the list price. And so I picked it up for, I think, 163, which is pretty good, right? But it had foundational issues. So that was, again, a new and challenging aspect of real estate I've never tried before. And I became a structural engineer very quickly.
Yeah.
And so I had quotes anywhere from 10,000 to 110,000. And you have to try to weed through these and understand what you're buying, what you're getting for all that. And I found the right guy. They were $30,000. And the only problem is they're so booked up, they were at the time, I think 2018. It took like 6 weeks for them to come in. So I was just sitting on the house for 6 weeks. We could do a little demo. But anyhow, they came in, they put in wall anchors, they put in piers, they put in some black epoxy on the walls to keep everything straight. And anyhow, they foundationally got everything secure. And then we were able to proceed with the rehab and clean that up. But the best thing I love about that property, it comes with like 4 lots on it. And you can sit out in the back. Pikes Peak is right up, looking up at it. It's just a beautiful yard. And so anyhow, we were able to save the house and just have a great location.
That's amazing. And yeah, like you said, the west side of town, the push and pull there, obviously, the location, the views are the pros there. And then, yeah, you're probably going to have a bit of structural issues on the west side of town, unfortunately, just because of, the soil quality and soil type over there. So I'm glad that you were able to get it for $30K. I mean, I guess in the grand scheme of things, I've definitely seen worse bids for structural out there. So you're able to get a super solid house for that. So that's pretty exciting. And you were mentioning to me earlier that you're looking to put an ADU on the property. So is each lot zoned for a single family? Because you mentioned it came with 4 lots, or are those also like multiple family lot zonings as well?
Right. So all 4 lots, it's considered one unit, but now we're replatting it to be one unit. Okay. And it's zoned for a duplex. So it's the main house and then the ADU.
Okay. Yeah. And it sounds like the ADU has kind of been a pain to get up and running.
Yeah, that's one thing I never expected. I kind of expected it because I tried doing it myself. I tried calling the city and I tried to figure out what I could do to what I don't even know what to do, help me, city. And it was so painful. I'd call on my days off from work and they'd say, call me back on Monday, and I'm at work, and I had my wife try to call, and everything was just not going anywhere. So I gave up on it. And then finally, I talked to my handyman down the Springs, and he knows somebody that's a builder. And so I called him up, and then he's been working with the city, and he knows all the right things to do and paper to push. And even with that, it's been over a year, and we're still trying to get through the city to get it first just replatted and then have the building permit.
Wow. So for the house that's there, you bought it for 163. You put 30K in structural. What about, did the home need any other renovations to it to get it in a good rentable condition?
Well, if you didn't want to live in 1955, it was just right out of 1950. It was just hilarious. The structural guy, he took a picture of it. He's like, I can't believe it. It hasn't been touched since 1955. And anyhow, it was another $60K to rehab the rest of the house.
Okay. Yeah. So you're all in for, I don't know what, 250. I can't do the math in my head like that, but
250, that's close.
Yes, close enough. So what are you guys renting it for currently?
Right now, the rent is $1,850 a month. So it's on the low side, and I just raised it, and it's really painful to tell the tenants, I'm going to raise your rent. But I look around, and the average rent in, South Old Colorado City there is running at like $2,100 for a small 2-1 or a small 3-1 older house. So I was like, I'm still giving them a good deal.
Yeah. And I think tenants are pretty receptive to understanding like where you're coming from, to that end, like trying to keep up a little bit with market rates while not trying to, put too much pressure on great tenants like that. So, I think that is just kind of one of those, awkward things of being a landlord in a way to have to worry about that. But honestly, yeah, I think that's a pretty good spread, especially in that location, for sure. Do you guys have any information, like solid numbers on what your ADU is looking like?
Well, I think the builder, before the inflation really kicked in, the last few years, but he was quoting me, I thought it was $200 a square foot, if I remember right. And I thought it's going to be about 850 square foot. It can only be like half the size of the main house. So I thought it was going to be 160,000 total. And then at some point, before the interest rates are going up, I was hoping to refinance, and look, kind of do some money moving around there.
Yeah, you might have to restructure that, I guess, now to see what's most advantageous in that regard. But yeah, I mean, I think being able to build a whole new structure for that, I mean, I imagine you'll be able to kind of meet the 1% rule, I would guess, by the time everything's said and done, close enough to it.
Right.
On that one building. Yeah. So that's great.
Right. Things are renting for, I think it's somewhere between $2 and $3 a square foot. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah. I mean, you guys definitely get a little bit of a premium on the west side, for sure. So yeah, I mean, I think just kind of based on what you described, 1 or 2 bedroom, brand new structure like that, I imagine, at the time of this recording, 1,500-1,600 seems very reasonable. If not, maybe even on the lower end. So yeah, for sure. So are your other properties in Colorado Springs, are they just kind of bread and butter, typical homes, go in, do a little bit of work and rent them out? Or do they have interesting plays on them as well?
I think, as you probably know, every deal has a story to it.
Yeah.
Right. And so the second one we bought was a duplex, and I've, tried my hand in multifamily. So I worked it out with structural. So let's try a duplex multifamily. And some little old lady that wanted just to move, the place was in pretty, disarray, not bad, but not great. And it needed pretty much the whole thing. And I could not find a handyman or a general contractor. I called everywhere I could. I think this was a year later or 2 years later in 2019, 2020. And I finally hired a guy, and he gave me some red flags, but I was like, well, the only person I could find. And he said $50K in 3 months. So I'm like, sounds good. And it was just, everybody I sent in to help him ended up quitting. And I was like, well, I wonder why that is. And anyhow, he's doing great work, but he needed a crew and it was just him. And after 3 months, and I think it was 60K already, and we still had another month or two to go.
Oh,
and
no.
and I hate just straight up confrontation, but when he's just draining my checkbook
Yeah.
and not getting there, I had to fire him. I've never had to fire him. And it was so traumatic to me to just say, this is not working. But he was good about it. And turns out that one of the crews that came through that did the cement work, I noticed that they were just really on top of things. So I reached out to them and he's like, absolutely, let's come in. We'll bang it out for you. And it was the difference night and day. It was unprofessional to professional. It was amazing. And then I finally saw the light of how these are supposed to go.
Yeah. Well, that's as painful as it was during, I'm sure it was a very good learning process that for, this one, subsequent ones, and I'm sure into your fix and flip business, you kind of figured out exactly how to hone in on screening your professionals that come in and do the work at that point. Yeah,
it's sure a tough thing to try to figure out, right? And somebody told me is, like if you put up with subpar work, that's what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
But it's struggle trying to figure out what is subpar and what's acceptable, what's not. And so that was in it. And we have great tenants in there, and both side by side, and they all. This seems like a little family down there. So every time I
great.
get to show up, I get to say hi to them. So
good. So they've kind of relatively long term, couple years tenants in there.
Yeah, just last year we had some turnover. Both couples left about the same time.
Okay.
And so I got 2 new couples in there about the same time. So, and they each have a dog, and the dogs love each other. And there's this giant, one of them has this giant Great Dane, and it's just the warmest, nicest dog you would ever meet.
Oh, that's so good though. I mean, yeah, if there's, peace between neighbors, then, I'm sure everything kind of trickles up to you in that regard. I guess I forgot to ask you earlier, are you self-managing all your rentals down here?
I am.
Okay.
I was just actually down Colorado Springs this morning, checking out the tenant at the other property, the third one.
Okay.
And they took great care of it. And so clean the gutters while it's down there.
So do you try to outsource a lot of, if a tenant calls you and says, hey, my faucet's leaking, do you jump in the car and drive down there and fix it? Or do you have like a network of contractors that you hire out, or how do you handle that? That's
a great question, especially with, 9 doors, 7 properties, and then our own house that we're managing, try to keep ahead of everything that breaks there too. So definitely, I know I should be doing who, not what, so I try to find the person to assign it to. And one part that I feel like for rental, for being a landlord, because this is this is my investment, right? And if I don't take good care of it, I don't think anybody is, right? Mm-hmm. So I've heard horror stories of people just blindly turning it over to, their giant investment to somebody to manage it. And it just, they end up hiring or letting somebody in that's changing their motorcycle oil on the living room carpet, right? So it's really hard. And this is one of the most important things to make this successful is really screen for your tenants. Mm-hmm. And then if you can do that right, then everything else kind of lays out flat and, is successful. So one part of the management I take very seriously is finding the right tenants and keeping in touch with them. So I do a lot of texting, a lot of group texts with people. So that part is definitely on me. And then, so I'm trying to there's only so much Rick to go around. So I'm trying to hire more, and sometimes I'm better, but like today I'm down there, I can clean gutters like anybody else. So if it's easy, I'll do it. If it's hard, I definitely call.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. Because you're up in Longmont still, right?
I'm in South Denver now.
South Denver. Okay. Oh, then that's a much better commute then. Okay. I was thinking you're coming from north of Denver down to Colorado Springs. So yep, I know what that's like. I used to live in Parker myself and would commute down here to self-manage. So definitely doable for sure. Yeah, I think what you mentioned in terms of screening and having, that right tenant in the property, I mean, makes or breaks like your whole experience, I think. So yeah, if you're able to do that up front and, just pick that perfect tenant to occupy your property, they'll take care of it. And, I think the rest will fall into place in most cases for sure.
Right. And then that was a lesson that I had to learn is when I first started, I really felt like I could tell whether if somebody was a good character or not. And I never screened. I just called some references and I think it was one of the properties here in South Denver. This lady came and she had a hard luck story and her ex-husband was the cause of all her problems and she had two little kids just like our kids and I was like, well, heck, I'll help you out. If you just need a break, I am there to help you. And then she fell right behind on rent right away and it just went downhill all just and all of a sudden my handyman went in there for fix something and he's like, Rick, the ex-husband is living there now.
Oh no.
I'm like, oh no. And again, it's like, I have a tough time evicting somebody with two little kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I can't even imagine.
And finally it got to the point where it was it was getting worse and worse. They were about 3 months behind. I'm paying their mortgage essentially, right? And my handyman went in to fix something else and so he got to know him a little tiny bit. And then he texted me like one week. He's like, Rick, your tenant's, the ex-husband is on TV. He's being arrested for embezzling. I'm like, and I watched the video and sure enough, he was some roofing company and he'd just get the money up front and he'd just walk off with it. And it's like, these guys were professional swindlers.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, so I got out the notice to evict thing and hired a lawyer and we got her out of there. And I've just never been so relieved to have my place back.
Oh my goodness. But now I assume that you have internal policies and procedures in place to screen your tenants now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I learned my lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I do an online screen, credit check, background check. And every time somebody comes to me with a hard luck story, as much as I want to help them, I just say, hey, I've already been taken once for $7,000. And as much as I want to help you, I just can't.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from with that. I think that to me is the hardest part to, kind of put blinders up for the stories like you said. And, no matter how sweet a person is, if they don't meet your stated criteria or the outlines that you've put for your property, then, you have to stick to your guns. And there's a reason why you have stated criteria. It's because, it's to protect yourself and your property. So yeah, I can totally understand where the heartstrings come from in that regard and how difficult. I think that's almost like, at least for me, it's one of the more difficult parts of being a landlord, I think, is, you want to help everyone, but you also have to keep your policies in mind, I think.
Right.
Yeah. So let's move on to kind of your footprint in Pueblo. What are you doing down there right now?
Right. So me and Doug, he's my podcast co-host. So I have a podcast called Secret Sauce for Success. And anyhow, so we interview people just like this. And it's very odd to be on the other side here. But yeah, so we only have so much money, because a lot of it's tied up in different things. And so we found something affordable, and Pueblo is affordable compared to, Colorado Springs and especially Denver. And so we're looking at places, first we just have to get calibrated, right? As you get to know any market. So we're working with an agent down in Pueblo, and she knows the area. She's doing some flips with her and her family. So they kind of know the system. And so we thought, well, let's just fit right into their little stream of flips and see how that works. And so what she's been buying, and that's what we're buying now, is about, we're trying to find something for 80 or 70 to 80K. And then we're trying to put in about 50K rehab, and then sell for like 180. And our goal is to make 30K on a flip.
Okay, great. So I take it that process has worked for you guys. Have you completed any flips down there? Are you guys kind of midway through, or how's that going?
Well, right. So remember the story about the handyman that just didn't move fast enough?
Yep.
So these guys are great. They're doing great work, but we're coming up on 5 months, and that's a long time for us, like an 800 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house.
Yeah.
And it needed everything, right? Of course.
Yeah.
And the costs are, again, you can blame inflation. It's just the costs are being overrun. So I think on Monday, we're getting all the appliances delivered. Tuesday, the plumber's going to come in and put the final stuff in. Wednesday, we're going to be done.
Okay.
So we're right on the cusp of it. But I don't think we're going to make 30K. I think we're going to make 10 to 15K, maybe, something like that. And then, so again, I'm new to the flipping business, and I believe you get taxed at a pretty high rate.
Yeah, it's ordinary income at that point, right?
Yeah, and then what is that, 28% or something?
Yeah, whatever your tax rate is.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so we're not doing very good on the first one. So but we're going to make money. So
honestly, from what I've heard I've never flipped in my life, so like disclaimer out there. But from what I've heard from flippers is that if you don't lose money on your first flip, then it was a success. So I would consider 10 to 15K on your very first flip and a learning experience. That seems like a pretty good success, if you ask me.
Yeah, you sound like my partner, Doug. He's totally stoked about it. And,
yeah, that's great.
So we bought the second house. We bought that earlier this month, and it was a fixer-upper, of course, and we got it for 72. We put the offer in pretty cheap. And after the inspection, we found, what little inspection we could do, there was no utilities. And so we asked for a $2,000 discount. The agent's like, no way. I was like, ask. And so they gave us a $2,000 discount down to 70. So it never hurts to ask on these, deals, right?
So how does that work? Do you have to call like the water company, the electric company to come and install utilities on the property, or how's that going to turn out?
Right. So that's where we're at right now. So we had the water company come out there, and for some reason, nobody was inside watching, which I still don't understand, but they turned the water on. Water was flowing too much. They turned it off. And it's like, well, it's been empty for 8 years. And that is the craziest part.
Wow.
We walked the place, and so we bought it without seeing it. We bought it with just doing a FaceTime with our agent down there. Okay. So we saw it, but not in person. And I would expect a property that's been sitting for 8 years to have a lot of, I don't know, cobwebs. I think Doug put it, he's like Indiana Jones walking through the cobwebs.
Yeah.
And there was a couple spiders. There was a couple mouse droppings around, but it just looked like it's been preserved for 8 years. So
interesting. I guess it has good insulation. Good seals around the windows and doors.
I don't know. Yeah. So we have to work with we have to get some general contractors out there to work with the city to get everything tuned up. We had the electrical out there. They said that we need to do some stuff, and we're working with the people right now.
Yeah, I'm curious. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but if there was no electric utility in the property, to get it reinstated, do you have to make sure like the panel is up to current code and the voltage? I don't know much in the way of that, but I didn't know if you kind of have to like have it present day standards to be able to reinstate utilities in that case.
Yeah, they gave us a list. I have to say I haven't looked at the list in detail for some reason, but it was this place. It was they put a new panel in like 2012 or something, and they put
Oh,
a new sewer line in 2012, and a new roof. I mean, it's like right before it went under, and they did a whole bunch of work to the place, and so I believe the panel is not too old.
yeah, that's pretty amazing. An 8-year-old sewer line and panel. I would definitely take that on a $70,000 house. Or
Right, right. We're even thinking about just flipping it and just demo it, get all the utilities on, and try to sell it and see if we can make some money just getting the first part undone.
Okay, so like kind of getting it up and ready for someone to take on, essentially.
Maybe, yeah. So we're
Yeah.
trying to figure out, what the best option is. So, I believe tomorrow we're heading down to Pueblo, and on the first house, I always like to do something, like the who not what. I'm terrible at it, so I love doing backsplash. It's just a very easy thing to do. With a little tile saw, you can make a kitchen look really nice. So Doug and I are going to head down tomorrow and finish the backsplash, and going to go meet the contractors at the other house, at the new number 2 house.
Yeah.
And so we found some new contractors that said that they can turn the house in 6 weeks, and for I think it was like 40K. So we're my partner Doug. He's like he's ready to go, and I was like, well, let's call the references. Let's see.
You've been burned. You understand kind of, the process for that.
But if we can get it done in 6 weeks, we'll have a little business here.
Yeah. Do you plan on keeping any of your properties in Pueblo as rentals, or do you want to kind of, get in and get out?
So that's a great question. So Angela, our realtor down there, I asked her the same question. I was like, should we be keeping any of these? Are you keeping any of yours? And evidently she was a property manager in a previous life and in Pueblo, and
Mhm.
she does not want to keep any of her properties
Okay.
because it's really hard to find good tenants. And I had a coworker tell me the same thing. He had some properties and just kept going through tenants, tried screening. So my first answer is no. And again, we're trying to build up a little machine, a little cash flow machine to eventually maybe buy longer term rentals up maybe in Colorado Springs.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I bought my first Pueblo rental property earlier this year.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So knock on wood, I've been having, fantastic experience with that. The property manager found some really, really qualified tenants, that are taking great care of the place. So I'm like, okay, keep going. And we have, several clients that bought, I don't know, within the last year or so down there, and all reporting, good things. So I think, I think it depends kind of like where you buy, and then of course the property manager that you link up with, because like you said, it all comes down to finding those great tenants that work for you. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with my rental property. So we'll have to chat later if if you want to keep any of yours, I can give you some references and everything.
Yeah. So what location in Pueblo, if I may
Yeah,
ask?
so in Belmont.
Belmont.
Yeah, so kind of by CSU, north of 50, east of 25. So yeah, it's a pretty up and coming little area. I really like it.
Okay. I'll have to
Yeah.
take a look in there.
Yeah, for sure. It's a pretty newish home, in the 80s. So
Oh, okay.
that's new in my opinion when it comes to rental properties. So yeah, I'm enjoying it for
And,
sure.
and can I ask you, how many properties do you have?
Let's see. I have 12 properties and 18 doors.
Very good. That's very impressive.
Thanks. Yeah, it's fun. And, just kind of like what you said, just mess up on, little bits here and there. And eventually you stop making those mistakes and then you learn new mistakes to make. It's just never ending. So yeah, I think I love how candid you've been, describing your mistakes that you've made. Hopefully it can help someone who's listening. But I think it just goes to show that, you have nine doors and you didn't stop, after a couple of mistakes here and there. I think that it's just part of the business, right?
Right. And I just love real estate. Like you said, you can mess up, but not too bad, hopefully, and still recover, with this rising interest rates, right? It's going to be a little tougher.
Yep.
Right. But I really believe in real estate. It's, besides working, trading your time for money, I started my own podcast just to help spread the word. Right. And, if I put a plug for my book, I wrote a book, Secret Sauce for Success. So pick it up on Amazon.
Okay, good. That was where I was going to ask, where can people get it? We will have a link to your podcast and your book in our show notes. And is there anywhere else that people can reach out to you?
You can call me, of course, 720-429-3303. If you want to be a guest on our podcast. And you guys, if you want to try our podcast, we'd love to have you on it.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks so much, Rick. I really appreciate you coming on our podcast and just kind of sharing your experiences and your strategies and how your strategies differ between markets. And I think it's just really good for everyone to hear different options and different ideas that people have and how, different people are making it work in, any environment that we're in right now. So I appreciate you coming on, and everyone reach out to Rick in our show notes. And if you have any questions for me, you can reach out to me at Jenny@envisionrea.com. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jenny.